What's happening? Welcome into the Matt Bernier Show, part of the In the Money Media Network. My name is Matt Bernier. You can follow me on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. This is episode 10 of the new and improved Matt Bernier Show for Monday, April the 13th, 2020. However you're listening to this thing, thank you for doing so. Obviously, you can find this on YouTube, as many of you do. You can go on over to the In the Money Media page. Please hit subscribe. Make sure that bell icon's lit up. The latest episode of this thing will be uploaded there pretty much every Monday night, occasionally Tuesday morning, depending on things. But for the most part, every Monday night, this will go up there. If you only listen audio, you can find it over on inthemoneypodcast.com. You can also find it on Apple Podcasts, anywhere else you listen to your podcasts. However you listen, please make sure you rate, you review, and you subscribe, because it goes a long way for all of us. It helps get content out there, but also it kind of just, the more thumbs up and things of that nature, and even if you don't like it, give it a thumbs down. But as long as there's some sort of interaction, it just helps things overall. And again, if you want to follow me on Twitter for any sort of things, whether it's questions, comments, concerns, you want to take a look at opinions, you have questions about races or anything, whatever it may be, at Bernier_Matt or beneath the video player over on YouTube. This episode, I will finally get to it. The 3-year-old fillies, a little bit under the radar. I did 3-year-old colts in geldings a few weeks back, and actually 2 of them ran back on Saturday afternoon at Oakland. They were both winners. Look, they weren't going to make you a ton of money, but hopefully it kind of tipped some people off. Skull Factor, who came out of a very live race, kind of highlighted him, saying he's going to be one maybe you want to keep an eye on for Mac Robertson. He goes out, wins very impressively in his second lifetime start. And then Pneumatic, the horse that defeated Skull Factor in the career debut, he comes back, stretches out to 2 turns, wins rather impressively while wide throughout for Steve Asmussen. 89 buyer speed figure for that one too. So those were 2 of the horses highlighted with the boys that were under the radar. This episode here, episode 10, we'll go over the 3-year-old fillies that maybe you haven't heard of just yet. We all know many of the names that are on the Oaks trail already. But maybe there's some that not only could be potential Oaks horses, given that it's going to be the first Friday in September now, but even some turf horses and different sort of, configurations. Turf sprinter, dirt sprinter, turf router, dirt router, whatever the case may be. It's going to be a few different ones sprinkled in throughout. But I'm going to kind of turn this one on its head, and we're going to start off with the updated pick history. And I don't want to call it a Q&A, because there aren't really a ton of questions. It's going to be more about what the comments from last week's episode, where a number of people enjoyed my sort of opinion of the best Derby fields over the past 20 years, and people were chiming in and sort of talking about what their opinions were. And look, for better or for worse, some folks didn't enjoy it, and that's fine. Going into these sort of things that some people are going to enjoy and some people aren't. But I did think some of the feedback was good. I thought, and I'm actually... Well, let's just start off with that. I'll go through, read some of these comments. And again, it's probably the easiest way if you're trying to interact. Probably the easiest way is beneath the video player on YouTube. Yes, I do see everything that comes through on Twitter. The problem is the Twitter feed just gets so clogged with all sorts of crap. You know that. Anybody that's on Twitter knows things can get lost in a heartbeat. So this is probably the easiest way to guarantee that I can take a look and see and sort of possibly get folded into next week's episode. And, I sound like a broken record, but with the way things are going right now, with some uncertainty about what kind of racing is going to continue on or whatever the case may be, these evergreen or more less timely shows that you can listen to whenever. It's not as though, the race happened this past weekend, so, I need to pay attention to it, or he's talking about something that could happen this upcoming weekend. These kind of shows, the ones going through and talking about, Derby's past and Breeders' Cups past that I'll go over, I'm sure, at some point. The interaction back and forth makes these a lot more effective and a lot more fun. So with these comments, and I'll go over some of them, those will be kind of the things that'll drive these sort of shows going forward, because if there's no sort of back and forth banter, I mean, what good is it? It's nice to hear differing opinions and things of that nature. So, and also, clearly we missed the number 2 segment. It didn't quite get into the main episode. If you missed it, it is uploaded on the In the Money Players podcast page by itself. You can find my number 2 as far as the Derbies were concerned, and that was the 2007 group with Street Sense and Curlin and Hardspun and all those boys. So, but some of the other just comments, just in general, that I thought were interesting, and again, there was no there's no rhyme or reason to some of the comments. The idea is it doesn't have to pertain to what you thought of the fields. This comment from A Sincere JNN, one of the comments, that Animal Kingdom Derby is the one Uncle Mo scratched out of, AK inherited Mo's jock. Mo's the better sire out of that crop thus far. I would agree 100%. I think Animal Kingdom was the better racehorse, but to date, I can't argue with that. I mean, Uncle Mo looks like he's an all-world sire. He's already sired a Derby winner. He's sired a number of very, very impressive winners and runners over the past handful of years. I actually was looking at it the other day. It's crazy for me that Uncle Mo is 10 now, I believe. I mean, it feels like just yesterday he was racing and doing big things on the track, and obviously the whole issue with him being sick and missing time and X, Y, and Z. It just feels like that wasn't that long ago, and I believe he's 10 years old now, which is wild, but. A good comment like that. Sean O'Brien had a good comment here. Great job on this. Always cool looking back and enjoying comparing. 20 years is a long time, especially when the fields are 20 deep. That's 400 horses or so. Sometimes hard to compare to, as top-notch horses like I'll Have Another, if they continued racing, most likely would continue to perform at a high level. Should that be a knock against them? I agree with you. I mean, it's a difficult piece to sort of factor in, because who knows what a horse like I'll Have Another could have gone on to do? Who knows what a horse like Bodemeister, who, if you're just looking at it from a pound-for-pound standpoint of how good was this race, I mean, Bodemeister's Kentucky Derby is as good as you're ever going to see in defeat. The fact that he dueled a Breeders' Cup Sprint winner into the ground and still had something left in the tank and still ran as well as he did, I mean, that was a giant Derby performance from him. And I think for folks like me who, I backed I'll Have Another months in advance, I liked them that day as well, you at least got, I think, some validation 2 weeks later in Baltimore when Bodemeister had basically the complete opposite. He had everything go his way, and I'll Have Another still went and got him. I think there were both top-notch racehorses, no question about it, and that is the difficult piece with any kind of an exercise like this. There's no guarantee that those horses wouldn't have gone on to do giant things and win Breeders' Cup races and win Dubai World Cups and Pegasus World Cups and, you name it. So that's always one of the difficult things. And again, it's why there's no right or wrong answer to any of these things. They're all opinions, and it's I call it barroom talk, because that's exactly what it is. It's you go back, you reminisce, you say, oh, this horse was great. Some people don't think he was as good or whatever. You can go so many different ways, but that's what makes it fun. Some of the other interesting comments in here, and again, like I said, some people enjoyed it, some people didn't. Tom Barch, I hope I'm pronouncing your last name correctly. Obviously in the minority, but I'm not. But I'm one who doesn't find any value in who was the best discussion, especially on what's currently a once-a-week podcast. Others are welcome to enjoy it, and you definitely need to keep doing things that you enjoy and are passionate about. It's your show. If I did enjoy this type of discussion, I know I'd enjoy listening / watching yours. And I respect that. This isn't going to be something, and I know that going into it, not all the topics, not all the things that I go over are going to be things that people love. But frankly, if you do things and produce things that everyone loves and just fawns over, then you're probably just kind of catering to one group of people, and you're not necessarily opening yourself up to differing opinions and thoughts. So I have no problem with people that do or don't like things, and I appreciate Tom's comment, because I don't feel like I get enough of that where there's pushback or people that do or don't like things. I'm not saying I don't appreciate all of the positive comments, but also I welcome the ones that say, yeah, you know what, not my cup of tea. I didn't really enjoy this. Totally fine. Totally understand it. I'd rather hear that than not, frankly. It helps sort of kind of, groom whatever road we're going to go down with these podcasts going forward. Some of the other interesting comments, and I'll only touch on one or two more. Scott Critchlow. This was highly enjoyable. Hope to see more shows like it. I probably will in the weeks coming, especially if the sort of racing scene stays as is. Hope to see more shows like it. I agree with you on 2013 being number one. Then I'd go 2011, 2007, 2000, and 2002. As to the last two, it's mostly for the horses Alex notes, and Alex, I believe, was one of the other, Alex Kibrick, I would imagine, was one of the other commenters below, but I'd add Trippy and maybe Graham Hall and Essence of Dubai into my reasoning. Not that the cases for 15 and 16 are weak, they'd be 6 and 7 for him. Maybe I'm just coming at it with older eyes and memories. No, you're coming at it from your opinion, and I again, there's no right or wrong answer to this. I don't think. I think that's what makes all this sort of stuff fun, is that there is disagreement, and again, you can lay out your reasoning. That's all I ever care about. Whether you agree or disagree, that's fine. I just would like to hear what the rationale and the thought process behind it is, and Scott laid it out there. So those are the kind of comments I appreciate. Those are the ones that I feel like are the most sort of, I think they're the most valuable. I think they're the ones that help everyone. You know, it's one thing to just say something, but if you can't teach people or you can't explain rationale and reasoning, then it doesn't really do anything. And Scott laid out his reasoning, why he liked certain groups, why he doesn't like certain groups, and I think that's all we can be looking for in a spot like this. So it's not really a Q&A for this week, but just the idea of go through some of the comments, kind of chop it up a little bit, see what people have to say. Let's go over the updated pick history. Now, we're at a point, we're getting closer, I would say, from a sample size standpoint, to be relatively comfortable making conclusions. I'm still not thrilled with some of the numbers at this point. The sample size is up to 74. Had some horses down at Oaklawn this weekend. Played a couple earlier in the week at Tampa. From a sample size of 74 on the win standpoint, 19% winners, which again I would expect. I'm still expecting it to level out around 23. Somewhere realistically between 22 and 25 is kind of the sweet spot for me. I expect it to end up there at some point. Still only at 19% though, with a 174 ROI. So that is down 13% overall. $148 wagered, $128.60 would have been returned. So all told, you're down about call it $19 and change. I wish some of the. I'm a little bit disappointed when I understand. For me, I've made it clear. I feel like I'm a rather streaky player. Like when I get hot, I can start seeing the ball really well, and other times I can be just up, what's creek. But I haven't really got a giant thrill, with the exception of Current 2 or 3 weeks ago, from some of the big prices putting in a bid. I like Bankett this past weekend. He never really threatened. He put in a nice bid to finish third and get a piece, but at 14 or 15 to 1, he never really looked like a threat to win this race. I'm still waiting for one of those bigger prices to come through for me, which I haven't had in a few weeks now. I've had a couple of the chalks, which, again, in all likelihood, you need to hit at such a high rate with the chalks to turn some sort of a profit. The idea is to hit some of those chalks, but then sprinkle in a bomb here or there to be able to get the job done and really inflate that ROI and get you back up into the positive. So obviously the win rate is a little bit on the low side. The ROI, I'm still confident that'll come back up closer to that $2 range when it's all said and done. Not a disaster right now, but certainly some work to be done. As far as the win play show is concerned, 46%. That number is way too low. That number should be closer to 55 and $1.60 ROI, so down 20% at the moment. $444 would be wagered, $354.60 returned on those investments. So still a ways to go. Again, sample size 74. I've maintained once we get to about 100, I feel like that's a fair sample to at least start drawing some conclusions and seeing positives and negatives, and we can go into that more as we get closer and closer to that. So that'll button up these two segments, but now probably the segment that you all have been waiting for this here episode for April the 13th. Let's dive into it. The under the radar 3-year-old fillies, at least at this point in the year. So as was the case with the 3-year-old boys, here are some under-the-radar 3-year-old fillies. When I say under the radar, it doesn't mean that maybe you haven't heard of them or you haven't seen the races that I'm talking about, but they're not graded stakes winners right now. They're not horses that have tried graded stakes company. They're horses that have either just debuted, they have run infrequently, let's say 2 starts, 3 starts, whatever it may be, maybe a little bit of traffic trouble. They go out for top flight connections. They've run fast. Maybe they're a little bit dirtied up, a number of different things. So that's just kind of clarifying what I mean by under the radar. You're probably not going to be looking at giant prices on these horses exiting any of these races. Maybe one of them you can get a decent number on. The other ones, though, they did enough in their debuts or in their second and third lifetime starts to think that they're going to get bet wherever they show up. But these could be horses that way down the road could end up trying graded stakes company, could end up being some decent prices that maybe you just want to get sort of on your radar earlier than later. Let's start with Casual. Now, this is a horse, a filly that actually we just saw run on Saturday. She broke her maiden as a first-time starter for Steve Asmussen at Oaklawn Park. She's got a giant pedigree. I think she could be absolutely anything. She's by Curlin out of multiple Grade 1 stakes winner Lady Tack. She won the Grade 1 Test, the Grade 1 Ballerina, the Grade 2 Fairgrounds Oaks going 2 turns, so there's a little bit of versatility there. She hasn't been much of a broodmare to this point, but the way that Casual won on debut at first asking was just really, really impressive. 90 Beyer speed figure, a 111 raw time form US rating. Whenever I speak of the time form US ratings, I talk about the raw number as opposed to the pace adjusted one, because I'd rather take the pace into consideration myself than just see whatever the number spits out, because sometimes I think it actually is advantageous to be forwardly placed as opposed to trying to come from off of it, so it can kind of hinder or alter the way that you sort of perceive whatever the number is. So I'd rather just do that on my own. So that's why I talk about the raw numbers. That was a really, really impressive effort. To be honest with you, the runner-up, Silver Bella, is also a horse that maybe you want to keep an eye on, because she ran a winning race. They were about 7.5 lengths clear of the rest of the field. So the fact that Casual breaks her maiden on debut and she's going to take on winners next time out, I would venture a guess to say, depending on what the racing calendar looks like, she'll be taking on graded stake company in her next start. Silver Bella will still be in against maidens, and she's going to be a very, very short price, but she's a very likely winner. This is a very similar scenario to me anyway of when we're going over the 3-year-old boys that were under the radar. The Skull Factor race with Pneumatic. Pneumatic wins the race. He's going to go on and take winners on, and he ultimately goes and wins. But Skull Factor, he ran a winning race that day. He comes back, breaks his maiden in his next start. So I feel like Silver Bella fits into that category. Casual, though, definitely a horse. You look at the pedigree, you look at the connections, and the way that she won, I think she could be absolutely anything at this point. And maybe she's one of those interesting horses that actually takes advantage of the circumstances this year, where the Oaks isn't for another 5 months. This could be a blessing in disguise, because this is a horse that in any other year would not be eligible or would not be ready to go for a race like the Kentucky Oaks. So maybe she's one that you want to keep an eye on. Eve of War, I think, is an interesting one for Todd Pletcher. Now, this is a horse that, from a pedigree standpoint, there's nothing wrong here. She's by declaration of war out of a broken vow mare named Special Thanks. The second dam is a sibling to multiple graded stakes winner Bedankin. Her career debut was very, very impressive. She goes out, basically wires the field, but she's got nice, easy speed. She gets out there and just cruises on the front end, opens up, and I know it's Gulfstream, but she wins rather comfortably. The second time going out in her career, first time against winners, bit of a disaster because she had a terrible, terrible stumble at the beginning. She tried afterward, but she was just sort of even throughout. I think there's some ability here, but in both of her starts, she wasn't the most alert out of the gate, and it makes me wonder if perhaps she's got some gait issues that need to be ironed out a little bit, but she's a horse that I wonder if you get a little bit of an inflated price in her third start, because that second start that we saw most recently, she had the trouble that she did, and maybe she's going to look a little bit dirty on paper, when in all actuality, I think as long as she can get out of the gate, I think the talent is there in spades. Eve of War is one maybe you want to throw a little bit of a horse watch sort of situation with. Linny Kate goes out for Chad Brown. Thought she was really impressive the way that she finished in her career debut. That was on February the 23rd. There's going to be another horse that comes out of that race that we'll talk about in a little bit as well. I loved the final eighth of a mile. It didn't look like she was looked like she was running, but it didn't look like she was going to come with any sort of giant finish. That final eighth of a mile, it was really when she extended, and that's a critical juncture with any of these turf races, because that final eighth we've seen so many times, just the nature of turf racing. Everyone does their best running late. If you have a little bit extra left in the tank, if you can really reach and extend and find that extra little bit, that can get you over the hump in a number of different instances. And Linny Kate, I think she kind of fits that bill. From a number standpoint, the career debut stacks up quite well. An 82 Beyer speed figure, a raw 99 time form US rating. So those numbers are relatively close, within a couple points of one another. Her pedigree, she's by Tonalist out of a Langfier mare named Quintile. The dam is a sibling to turf-rated stakes winner Lady Carlock, a sibling to multiple turf-rated stakes winner Solvig. So there's plenty as far as pedigree is concerned. Way deep on the dam side is Christy Cat. So Linny Kate has the potential to be something serious. We know Tonalist, he won the Belmont Stakes. He also did really well going a little bit shorter, though. He won the Cigar Mile in his last career start. So Linny Kate could do, it seems like, from pedigree standpoint, distance isn't going to be any sort of an issue for her. She's in great hands with Chad. You wouldn't want anyone else to have a turf horse. I think she's really interesting. And again, she's not one that's going to be any sort of massive price going forward whenever she faces winners for the first time in her second lifetime start. But she's one that from a talent standpoint, I think it's there. Now, here's a horse that I'm going to say there are two horses out of this group of 8 that I'm going to throw out that I think I'll probably make some silly statements that hopefully you all will keep me honest and let me know what you think about any of these horses and any of these thoughts that I have on them, either beneath the video player on YouTube or on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. A horse called Prairie Wings. Prairie Wings ran on Easter Sunday. So if you weren't locked into the racing that day, like many people weren't, you may have missed this horse. She's 0 for 2 lifetime thus far. Her first career start was with Kieran McLaughlin. She is a Shadwell horse now that Kieran is no longer training. This horse has been shifted over to Todd Pletcher's barn. In yesterday's race, and I'm saying yesterday because I'm recording this on Monday the 13th, she was completely loaded with nowhere to go, turning for home. Finally, there was a little bit of a seam. She finished really well once she was able to get clear. To me, she was unlucky yesterday. I feel like she was the best horse in the race. I go back to her career debut, slow out of the gate, breaking from the inside. And look, she was under an all-out ride for a long time, but I liked what I saw. I feel like she is showing that there is ability here. The race yesterday on Sunday, on Easter Sunday, she earns an 81 Beyer and 95 raw time form US rating. The pedigree would suggest that she'll run all day. And that's the interesting thing for me. You look at sort of the progression we've seen from her distances, start 1 to start 2. She went from 6 furlongs to a 1-turn mile yesterday. She's by Tappet out of a Sadler's Wells mare named Love Me Only. I mean, this is a pedigree that screams 2 turns longer. I think she's really good. And maybe the numbers wouldn't suggest that just yet. But sometimes when you just see the way that horses move and what she has, I don't want to say overcome, because technically she hasn't won a race yet. She's 0 for 2, but I feel like her first 2 starts have been very, very educational for her. And sometimes you get more from these kind of tough luck defeats than you do from going out there and winning by the length of the stretch and putting up gaudy speed figures. I think she's going to gain a ton from each of these 2 lifetime starts. I'm very high on her. She's one that I'm going to say will be, and again, hold me to it. I have no problem being wrong, but if I'm right with something like this, you better believe I will bow when this happens, if it happens. I think Prairie Wings is going to be a graded stakes winner when it's all said and done. She's 0 for 2 right now. It's early on in her career, but I think between the pedigree, between the connections, and what she's shown in 2 lifetime starts, keeping in mind, too, the way that she ran at Gulfstream yesterday, that 1-turn mile, I talk about it on dirt all the time. You need to be so much the best coming from off the pace at a 1-turn mile. And I think she would have won the race had she been able to get into the clear earlier. That's just my opinion. We'll never know if that's right or wrong, but I will make this stance and the statement now that Prairie Wings will be a graded stakes winner at some point for Todd Pletcher and company here. Too Sexy is another horse maybe you want to throw in your stable mail, your horse watch, whatever it may be. She is a Christophe Clement trainee. Thought it was a good effort from her on April the 2nd, so we're just going back about 10 days, 11 days. She had a pretty good trip throughout, but really when she had an opportunity to go through down on the inside, I thought she was a little bit reluctant to do so. She did eventually go through, but she really kicked it in once she was past that horse. So I just don't think she appreciated being in tight down there on the inside. Once she was able to get through and then things opened up a little bit, that's really when she extended and leveled off. She galloped out very, very well. Big late kick. When you look at the pedigree, she's by Quality Road out of a Stormy Atlantic mare named Cake Baby. From a numbers standpoint, a 78 Beyer speed figure, a raw 93 time form US rating. She's one that I can see breaking the maiden soon, but admittedly at a price that's probably not going to be very appetizing. She's run twice, and she's run from a number standpoint 2 very comparable races. I believe the first race was a 75 or a 76 Beyer. So it's not as though she took a giant step forward and start 2 from a number standpoint, but visually I feel like there is still something there. I think she will break the maiden soon. I don't know what her sort of ceiling is, but I think she's a decent horse and one that maybe you want to keep an eye on. Here's the other horse that I will throw out there and make some bold statements with. This is a Chad Brown trainee. Her name is Publication. Publication, I thought it was a phenomenal effort, and she's actually exiting the same race that Too Sexy is at Gulfstream on April the 2nd. If you haven't seen it, you can go back and find the tape. YouTube, Gulfstream puts all their replays up on YouTube, so you can find this April 2nd. I believe might have been the 6th race, somewhere around there. She was as rank, and I don't want to say rank, but she was pulling very, very hard. Very hard. She wanted to go. And Emisael Jaramillo had the mount that day. And he had an absolute stranglehold on her just to try to get her to relax a little bit. And it's not as though she was throwing her head about. She wasn't, kind of a crazy one out there. But you could tell she was bowed. She wanted to go. Waiting. First time starter. You know that these things can take a little bit of time for these horses to kind of figure things out in the afternoon. And with her pulling as much as she did for, let's say, the opening half at least of that race, I wouldn't have faulted her at all if she got a little bit tired and maybe we didn't see any kind of a late kick. We got the complete opposite of that from her. When she was finally sort of extricated from where she was down toward the inside, she angled out about 5-path turning for home, and she exploded late. I mean, do you want to talk about full of run? She, to me, was the definition of full of run. Galloped out very, very well. The numbers come back pretty solid for a first-time starter, a 77 Beyer and a 92 raw time form US rating. And then you take a look at the pedigree, and this is the piece that I look at and I say, there's something here. She's by Tappet out of a mizzen-masked mare named Filimbi. You may remember Filimbi from not too long ago. It's only been a few years. She was a turf-graded stakes winner out at Santa Anita, and she was, I believe, if I remember correctly, she was a little bit kooky, so maybe, you combine that with the Tappet, that's why publication perhaps was a little bit keen early on. But I watched that race. I see the connections. I believe this is a Juddmonte horse. I see it all, and I think this is a graded stakes type of horse down the road. She's only run once, but she showed enough in that debut to make me think that there is something, again, and knowing the connections, knowing who she's with Chad. Maybe I wouldn't be so bullish if it were a smaller barn, and I can say the same for Pletcher's horse that I was just speaking about, Prairie Wings. Maybe I wouldn't be so bullish on those two if the girls were with smaller barns. But knowing Chad's expertise with turf, knowing Todd's ability to get horses to, fire on the biggest stages, whether it's Saratoga or Belmont or wherever, it doesn't matter. Santa Anita, it doesn't make a difference. I feel like Publication is going to be a graded stakes winner when it's all said and done, and Prairie Wings. Those will be my two, probably bordering on silly statements for this segment, but those are going to be my two bold predictions. Publication and Prairie Wings will both be graded stakes winners when it's all said and done. And the last horse that I'll touch on for 3-year-old fillies that might be a little bit under the radar, we'll go back to February the 23rd at Gulfstream Park. Shug McGahee, he had a first-time starter called Talking Book. Talking Book is by honor code, so we know there's quality as far as the sire is concerned. He's off to a hot start, and she is out of the King Mambo mare named Mumbo Jumbo. Mumbo Jumbo won the Pennsylvania Oaks a number of years back, but the dam, she is a sibling to the Grade 3 Marathon Turf winner, Texting. So long distance in the pedigree. I shouldn't say long distance in the pedigree. There is. Doesn't necessarily mean that Talking Book is going to be a long distance type, but when you see what Dam Side produces and you see honor code, you think distance isn't going to be any sort of an issue for her. She earned a 71 Beyer and a 91 raw time form US rating in her career debut. The thing that I was most intrigued with, she lagged so far behind the field early on, she was just totally outrun. She didn't possess or show any kind of real early foot. The big thing for me was once she got the engine cooking, she flew home. She got her final quarter mile in 22:88. And my note that I've taken is that with the way that the turf is playing at Gulfstream Park, her running style, if this is what her running style is, and it's too early to tell because she's only run once and she's figuring things out. But that sort of running style at Gulfstream, it's just not going to work. So for her to finish the way that she did in her first time start, going 2 turns, and she galloped out like a freight train, those to me are all major positives. Because if you get to a different track, if you get to Belmont Park, if you get to Saratoga, if in the fall we get to Keeneland or one of these other places, I think her running style is going to be much more conducive there to success as opposed to down at Gulfstream, especially right now with the way that the turf seems to be going. So I look at that and say, yeah, she finished, I think, 6th, maybe 5th, 6th, something like that in that career debut. But she's one that I think that you might be able to see something from going forward. Not as bullish as the other two girls that I spoke about, but I think Talking Book might be one that you want to keep an eye on. So like I said at the top, these aren't horses that are probably going to make you, they're not going to be 15-1 chances, but they're horses that perhaps you can keep an eye on now and think, you know what, this horse could be a graded stakes type in time. Casual, Silver Bella, Eve of War, Linny Kate, Prairie Wings, Too Sexy, Publication, and Talking Book. There are, I believe, eight or nine 3-year-old fillies that might be a little bit under the radar. Let me know what your thoughts are on any of them. If you're familiar with them, if you're unfamiliar with them, go try to find some replays of them. Again, Gulfstream puts all their races up on YouTube, so you can find those horses that ran at Gulfstream. Agree, disagree, other fillies that maybe I've missed and you feel like I should touch on. At Bernier_Matt or beneath the video player on YouTube. Speaking of all those places, please rate, review, and subscribe wherever it is. So if you're over on YouTube, subscribe to the In the Money podcast page. Make sure the bell icon's lit up while you're over there. My own personal page, Matt Bernier. Please subscribe to that. Bell icon lit up. On Twitter, follow me at Bernier_Matt. And anything else that you guys want to hear over the next little while, please let me know. Feel free to drop a line wherever it may be, whether it's in the comment section or over on Twitter, because again, just with the uncertainty of what the racing calendar is going to look like going forward, I feel like some exercises of this nature are going to be not only desired but necessary in some instances. So that's going to wrap things up for this Monday, April the 13th episode number 10 of the Matt Bernier Show. Thanks to every one of you that listen, however you're listening and wherever you're listening. And until next Monday, when I will be back and we'll talk about some sort of racing, whether it's going back and looking at some other things that have happened, or if you all have questions or different sort of topics that you want to hear about, let me know about it. Whatever it ends up being, we'll be back next Monday with another episode 11. But until then, enjoy this. And as far as the wagering is concerned for this upcoming week, best of luck however you play, whatever you play, and wherever you play. This has been the Matt Bernier Show.